This drink, I like it.
I know, it's great, right?
Another!
Welcome back, everyone, to the Untitled Marvel Project. I'm your host, Tanner Dykstra, joined by Tucker Hazel, who's cringing at my intro,
No, I
and
was smiling.
Abram Buhner.
That was my smile. That was my happy.
Oh,
me.
that was his smile. And, of course, Abram Buhner. We're here, folks, to do, for the first time, to my knowledge, a ranking of the films in the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Yeah.
Now, I've heard some people telling me, high tales of maybe some more famous people who have done this before. Not to my knowledge. I think these people are lying, telling tall
and
tales.
legends, I say.
Yeah, myths even that these may be similar to the myths of the Norse gods,
Oh,
like Thor. Thor is the film we are talking about this week. If you want more smooth transitions like that, you should subscribe to Backlog Banter, the channel that you're currently watching. You should like this video, because that was a great transition. And join the Discord. That link's in the description.
Good.
I don't have any clever thing to say about that. Just do it. Just do it. But folks...
Mjolnir.
Yeah.
Bifrost.
Oh, the creativity
Just
that
say
flows
words.
through these walls.
Heimdall.
Great one. Great one.
Great one. Well, I do have a slight addendum to our Iron Man 2 episode last week. These boys brought such watertight arguments in favor of Iron Man 2 that I just had to amend my score from last week. I changed it from a 5.6 to a 6.4. That's not going to be a staple of this. We like to say true to ourselves. So just because we did it last week, there's only 3 movies on the ranking right now. Change that score on that. So the average for Iron Man 2 is now a 6.9. Still stays in that second place.
Yes.
But now, with that all out of the way, we got the house cleaning done, like Tima likes to say. Thor. Kenneth Branagh. I want to know you guys' thoughts, because I had some fun returning to this one, and from our private musings, one of us liked this a lot more than the other 3. So I'd like to throw to that person, Abram Buhner.
Yes, I like this movie. I think saying I like it quite a bit is not exactly accurate, but I think that this movie is pretty fun to watch. I've got pretty major issues with the period of time. I would say maybe like post Thor's arrest to like, I don't know, maybe when all of his friends come down. I think that the second half of the third act slows the pace to a crawl, because I don't think that Natalie Portman and her merry group of maybe named scientists are that compelling to watch. But I think on the whole, when you get that portion of the film out of the way, it's pretty engaging. I think it's Kenneth Branagh directing Shakespeare again, but this time the Shakespeare is just Norse and Marvel flavored, and because of that, I think it's pretty fun. I think he really nails the Asgardian stuff. I think we get some fun shield elements with Coulson as usual. I think that the fish out of water storyline is really great. And so in spite of a pretty weak human plotline, I had a lot of fun returning to Thor.
I think my problem comes in the fact that I don't really see that human plotline as just a part of one of the acts. I see it as half the movie.
Sure.
And that half of the movie does not appeal to me. It's sort of the most bare bones possible God on Earth story that can be told. And while I do think there are certain elements of it that I do enjoy, they're just really ideas of elements that were obviously fleshed out later on in Thor's character and development of Asgard and the greater Marvel universe. But I agree with you. I honestly think that Natalie Portman as Jane Foster is very weak. She's a fine actress. I don't think they have chemistry. She's like giving him googly eyes, but you don't feel anything between them. Their relationship has like 3 moments to develop, and then just boom, catches back up, and they're suddenly so in love with each other. And that really takes my attention away from anything else that is creative and going on in the larger universe. But I also just think that my greatest problem with this is Chris Hemsworth is just okay. I think he's totally serviceable as Thor. He gets better in the future movies, but in this first appearance, he's so greatly outshone by Tom Hiddleston and Anthony Hopkins as Odin, Loki and Odin, and some of the other supporting cast. I think he's just kind of wooden here. And I don't have a lot of reason to connect to his character, because he's kind of just this bumbling guy who gets everyone else into trouble, and it just doesn't work for me.
Yeah, I think you made some good points there, Tucker. I will say I have to give Chris Hemsworth points. You know, he's fresh off of going into Thor. This is like his first Hollywood role, I think, from memory.
Possibly.
Before this, he was like
Some
an
research.
Australian sitcom star. So you have to give him some
Bit of a
props.
difference there.
He also got ridiculously shredded. So there's that as well. And in that same vein, I think you bring up a lot of great points about him and Jane Foster not having the most deep relationship in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but if you really want just hot people making googly eyes at each other, that's what you get in Thor.
Yeah.
I gotta
Not
say,
that simple, I guess.
I gotta defend Chris Hemsworth a little bit. I
Okay.
think he's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And I think that he's definitely helped by writing and by the scenarios he's put in. In a vacuum, I think he's charismatic enough. I think his big, dumb Asgardian smile when he throws the coffee cup into the ground because he wants more coffee works. I think he's got sort of that brutish Neanderthal anger that he can bring out
Sure.
for like the sea when he's trying to siege that shield facility to get Mjolnir back, right? I think that he pulls off those different dimensions of the character well. Obviously, his acting improves the longer we see him.
Yeah.
But I do think that he has a certain inherent charisma that makes him fun to watch. But I definitely agree that he gets stronger when we get into obviously like Ragnarok and things like that.
I think what I was getting at more isn't that I don't like his performance here, is that Tom Hiddleston as Loki and Anthony Hopkins as Odin are honestly, I think, just more interesting characters.
Sure.
They feel more at home in their roles, and when comparing him to them, I'm like, oh, okay. I would actually just rather be seeing them than coming
Sure.
back to this fucking oaf guy. But a lot of this movie in concept is really interesting. I do like the fish out of water story, the idea of this really headstrong Asgardian prince who gets thrown back to Earth as penance, basically, for his fucking mistakes, and then coming to terms with his own mortality and relationships to other people. That's actually a pretty compelling story, and within that, you have the theme, which I think is very strong, of the relationship between magic and science and how there's just different perspectives on things. That's a really interesting idea, and there's sequences in this that I love, but when it comes down to not really liking the relationships between the characters, not feeling they're well fleshed out or well acted, I think the pacing is very weird in terms of jumping around between locations and all sorts of things going on, and the cinematography just being, I think, bad. I think it's aggressive when it doesn't need to be, and we're going to talk about the Dutch angles.
Let's just talk about it.
Let's just do it
But
now.
those elements take away from my connection to this story that I do think is so interesting in concept, but there's just this layers of water that I have to peer through to find what I want to look for in this movie.
Some beams of the Bifrost that you have to look through to find
but
the
that's
good
like
in the film.
shiny and good. I'm talking like fucking
Unlike
muddy
water, which
swamp
is
water.
murky and bad.
Yeah.
So the Dutch angle thing, let's just talk about it.
Yeah.
I'm an average Dutch angle enjoyer. A lot of
Mhm.
the pictures I take for my Twitter, for instance, are almost always Dutch angle because I think it looks neat, right?
Yeah.
And so I really blame you motherfuckers because I wouldn't have noticed it had you not told me to look for it when I was rewatching the movie last night. But there are some sequences where maybe 60% of the shots are Dutch angle.
It doesn't even make sense most of the time.
Right, and it doesn't really make sense. So that is not great. But I will say, I disagree that the movie doesn't look good. I think in large
I disagree as
portions,
well.
the movie looks very good. One thing I really love is the use of color. I think that there's a much smarter use of color here than especially the sort of desaturated, made for digital, made for big screen Marvel look we start getting with like Civil War and things, right? I think that Asgard, sure, you go to Jotunheim and everything is one color, like
Is one dark blue.
That sequence is so
Yeah.
dark.
It's really bad.
It's
Yeah.
bad, but when you're in Asgard, you've got the lushness and the great like horizon vistas and the Bifrost and everything. I think it's genuinely a pretty film. And back to that action sequence of trying to get Mjolnir, I think that's choreographed pretty well. There's some great shots, like when he's like covered in mud and shouting and everything.
Yeah.
I
He's
generally
wiping
think
poop off. He look like he's been eating ass. He fucking wipes the shit off his face.
I think it's I think on the whole, the cinematography and the color and the use of color and the art direction for me worked a lot.
I agree. I think by and large the cinematography is pretty good. I can appreciate Kenneth Branagh wanting to do something different with all those Dutch angles. I don't think it's I don't know if it's a negative for me. It's just funny how often it happens. Like
I think
I
it's
don't think it
distracting.
ruins the film. I get it's that it can be distracting, and that can be a negative. Like I assume it is for you, Tucker.
Yeah.
But I just think it's funny. I just think it's a funny thing about this film that like 60% of it is Dutch angles. I don't think it detracts anything for me personally, and it is just like a fun little wrinkle that you can joke about with Thor. He's like, oh hey, remember in Thor where like every shot is a Dutch angle?
Oh,
But
God.
I do think this the by and large it is well shot. You know, there's some great use of the New Mexico setting with the setting sun and stuff like that. And like Abram said with Asgard, I think the art direction for that is very good. I think it really brings out the the shininess and like this otherworldly mythological thing about this giant golden city with towering pillars of that are incomprehensible to people on Earth. I think it is pretty good.
I think what I was trying to get at, and maybe I wasn't clear with this, is not that the film on the whole has terrible set design, creativity, and Asgardian design and cinematography. I think is just inconsistent. This film is so hit or miss in terms of in each particular sequence you feeling like, oh, actually this is pretty and visually interesting, and then oh, okay, gray human bullshit. Oh, I can't see anything here because they just did not turn the lighting on. It's so hit or miss in terms of what you're getting out of each sequence that it was really jarring to be thrown in and out of those. Like occasionally you'll get a really cool shot and I feel like I'm emerging from the deep, like, oh, a breath of fresh air, seeing something that's like really solidly shot and framed and color and lighting and all that.
Yeah.
But that's a problem. I would rather consistency, even if it's mediocre, than feel like I'm going up and down in terms of the visuals.
Sure. I think some of that might also be due to, things where Kenneth Branagh is in his wheelhouse, like when he's just shooting stuff in New Mexico or whatever, versus.
Now, quick question. Do you think Kenneth Branagh was born on the side of a hill or something like that?
Oh, that's entirely possible.
Maybe when he's looking to the camera, he's like, oh, I want this to be straight. Let's turn it 30
We
degrees.
should have filmed. We should have all had our cameras like this for the entirety of the recording.
Oh, should we do that from here on out? Should we all do that?
Hold it.
Do we
Hang on.
Dutch?
I can do that. I think I can get it.
No, I'm not saying a Dutch angle for the rest of the recording, Tanner. No, I will
Oh, here
not
we
do
go.
that.
I will. I'll do it. Fuck
All
you.
right.
I'll do it.
Okay.
Um,
All right, Ken.
Oh, what was I gonna say? What was I gonna say though? I think a lot of that could be Kenneth Branagh in his element, as a filmmaker when he's just shooting stuff on sets rather than like choreographing and directing in all CGI fight sequence. He's not really done that
Right.
before.
There are some.
well,
Yeah, there's definitely that juxtaposition.
Yeah.
I actually, speaking of Kenneth Branagh being in his wheelhouse, I think he's actually in his wheelhouse when he's in Asgard, because as I joked to you before we started recording, it's in large part a Shakespeare movie. In terms of the themes of brothers versus brothers and brothers versus fathers and all of this stuff. It's very traditionally Shakespeare, and with the big twist of, oh, the brothers are to seize control of the kingdom, right? And so I think that's when the material really works the best. And when I think the film is probably at its most compelling, because Branagh, for those who might not be familiar, is a Shakespeare director. That's how a lot of people from a directing standpoint know him, because he's incredibly good at those adaptations. And so I think that he really was the right director to handle this storyline and these characters. And I think it shows.
Yeah. He's
It's
playing
definitely
Shakespeare
really
in the
interesting.
park.
As that's a future joke. But I do think you're right, and it's interesting as someone who has gotten into film history and learning about directors and stuff, looking back like, oh shit, this was directed by Kenneth Branagh. Like his name just sticks out above everyone else, especially in the first few phases of, oh, they got a really established director to do this. Who the fuck directed Incredible Hulk? Some French sounding guy.
Louis Leterrier.
Leterrier, whatever.
Leterrier.
John Favreau, known for Iron Man.
Yeah.
Well, Joe Johnston's a little different.
Yeah.
But okay, well, it's hit or miss. Regardless, I'm saying Kenneth Branagh on a different echelon, though. his directing style, not necessarily for me. It definitely took me out of the movie. And I do think that it is his experience where you can see what shines and what doesn't. Because as Tanner was saying, the action sequences in this movie, I think are pretty poor. You can get some cool, okay choreography for the seizing Mjolnir sequence, but a lot of it is weird green screen backgrounds and rubbery movement and CGI monsters and I think pretty bad makeup and stuff for like the frost giants. It is really awkward to watch those fight sequences, which luckily I guess there aren't that many of. But when they do show up, you're like, oh no, what the hell is going on here? Very hard to keep track of.
Now, I will say, yeah, and this is a trap we fall into with most reviews. We talk a lot about a lot of this minutia before we address like the story of the film in any semblance. So, what do you guys think about the story that Thor tells? I mean, we talked about how we liked it being a fish out of water, but from beginning to end, what do you think about the story?
I like the story quite a bit actually, because I think to Tucker's point actually, but there not being a lot of action. This is more of like a character drama, which feels really weird to say about Thor, but it kind of is, and I think that's interesting. I think that Loki, while I disagree that his plot falls apart. I think his plot becomes a little too convoluted as the plot as the narrative moves
Did I say
along.
it falls apart?
I was
I
snooping.
didn't mean that.
No, I was referring more to our friend Nisk, who says
Okay,
that
okay.
in her letterbox review, and I was kind of
Yeah.
snooping everybody's letterbox reviews for Thor last night. By the way, join our Discord so you can share your letterbox reviews with me.
So we
Absolutely.
can stalk them.
Yeah.
But I think that Loki is a genuinely really compelling villain who's set up very
Yeah.
well here, and I think that Thor's arc parallel to him works pretty well too. I like the realization that Loki's been lying to him. I like how you can sort of pick up hints of Loki's deception from the beginning of the film and the way that carries through the political angles, the personal angles. I think it's a really successful story.
Yeah.
Yeah, his backstory of being a frost giant and all that, I actually think is one of the most compelling elements of that character. And it had nothing to do with this film, but it's unfortunate that wasn't played out in later films in terms of him
Yeah.
having blue skin occasionally or whatever. It doesn't really matter. But I did think that that was a compelling reason for him to sort of twist into a darker character who is using his powers of mischief for nefarious means now. And he's a triple crosser. He crosses Thor, he crosses Odin, then he crosses the frost giants to sort of bring himself to power. And I think the reason that I am so underwhelmed by Thor is, as I was saying, the juxtaposition. I think Loki's character is infinitely more interesting from my perspective. The idea of him manipulating people and coming to power and having that history is honestly just more compelling to me than this gaudy, headstrong guy.
Yeah. I think. First I'd like to talk about Loki a little bit because I do think that Tom Hiddleston probably turns in the best performance of this whole movie. It's heightened a little bit, there's some melodrama a little bit to when they're shouting at each other, those father and son arguments between him and Odin. But I think he turns it he delivers those lines very well. When he realizes Odin's whole thing about he abducted him as a child, and he's like, you lied to me my entire childhood, like lying to me, telling me that I could have a chance to be the king of Asgard. That's just not true. You would never have a frost giant be the king of Asgard. Why did you do this? And Odin's trying to tell him, like, I love you. You're my son still. And Loki just doesn't believe him. And that kind of plays into the Loki's whole character arc into 2021's Loki series. If you don't mind me saying.
I don't mind you saying.
I really
okay.
mind it actually.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Well, I hope you don't mind me saying this because this might be a bit of a hot take, but I think this might follow sort of our complaints and fixes we had for the Iron Man 2 story. Because what you have here is you have this headstrong, arrogant person who gets, humbled at the beginning of the story, and the rest of it is sort of an introspective journey for him, learning the errors of his ways. You still get that middle of the movie action sequence that we had a confusion, like, how would you do that in Iron Man 2? And you have a resolution at the end where he resolves those character flaws. I think that from memory, those were sort of our issues with the Iron Man 2 story, and I think Thor nails them, it does them, I should say. I think it's wobbly all the way sort of through its story, and it's not super engaging. because like we said, the interactions and chemistry between actors might not exactly be there. But by and large, I think the idea of this arrogant prince of Asgard who gets humbled, turned into a human, and has to, come to terms with the fact that he's not worthy, and that a true king of Asgard never seeks out war. He chooses to protect people, which again continues further into the MCU and gets tied onto Endgame. Even that to be worthy of Thor's hammer, you have to fight to end the fight, not fight for fighting's sake. I think that stuff is all in here. Maybe not utilized the best, but it is there, and I can appreciate that.
I agree. I also like Thor's arc, and I think it opens up some great moments of Shakespearean melodrama again, like when he goes to grab Mjolnir and he can't lift it, he's covered in mud, and the Raven Coulson's like, and all that. I think that's a good moment. I think that for a relatively simple storyline, it packs a lot in there on that more thematic level, as you're saying, Tanner. So while I think it is kind of let down by those human characters, that through line I think is still really strong.
Yeah. We've been getting nice and serious about this silly Asgard Thor movie. Should we talk about some of the sillier aspects of this, like the blonde eyebrows? What's up with that? Hey, costume designer, whoever you were for this movie, what's up with the blonde eyebrows?
Oh my fucking god. I'm so glad that's fixed in the future because it's so distracting. He takes off that helmet as he's kneeling down in front of Odin. It's like, oh, two beams of fucking sunlight coming out of his forehead. It's like, no, who decided this was a good idea?
I will even say, even the blonde beard is kind of weird. Like, it in future movies, like I'm thinking about like Infinity War, it is just kind of like the same color as his hair, which is more brown even.
That's usually how beards go, yeah.
Oh, well, interesting. But yeah, just the whole ensemble of him just being like golden blonde all the way through his facial hair is very strange, and like Douglas said, kind of distracting.
Let's talk about the actual humor in the movie for a second,
Sure.
which I think is actually pretty good. I think it's well done. It gets kind of slapsticky, like with Thor getting hit by the car twice, but I think it works. And I think that like the fish out of water storyline does lead to some good comedic moments. I like when he goes to the pet store to try to buy a horse.
That's
and he
great.
Can't buy a horse, so he wants the biggest dog that they have. I think that's a good joke.
Give me one big enough to ride.
I think there are some genuinely good jokes here that I think play up the Thor himbo angle pretty well.
Yes.
There are certainly a few that I enjoy, though I think that the reason the humor doesn't work all the way through for me is because I kind of wish that Kenneth Branagh was able to play into his melodrama seriousness, because the moments I think the film is at its strongest, even though this is contradictory to my opinions on other Marvel films, is when it is playing into that seriousness and doing the political interpersonal melodrama, whatever. So when they make a joke or put the Warriors 3 in a funny situation where someone's bumbling, I'm like, okay, yeah, I guess they have to include this, but I do feel like they're kind of out of place, mostly because I don't care too much for most of the characters, so that when they make a joke, I'm like, meh, well, I guess they're all just kind of bit characters at that point. I like Darcy and Selvig a lot, actually. Your point about the human characters, I think for me only applies to Jane Foster. I think that both Darcy and Dr. Selvig have pretty obvious personalities that shine through and bounce off of Thor in interesting ways. I do like the bond that Selvig forms with Thor, but yeah, the humor is pretty hit or miss for me. And while in the moment I think some of it is funny, they're just not as memorable as a lot of other MCU humor. So it gets a little knocked from that for me.
Sure. Hawkeye's in this. How about that? Little debut of Hawkeye.
Yeah.
So this is one of the things that I was most disappointed by.
Really?
By this film upon rewatch. He's completely useless here.
Yes.
And I mean, ultimately, fine, whatever. It's not Hawkeye's movie, but if you're gonna introduce Hawkeye, why couldn't Hawkeye have subdued Thor or something? Because then you would have had a great character dynamic to play off of in the Avengers, and they're both back together.
True.
And then Thor is super powerful, and then he can just like intimidate Hawkeye or something. And there was room for a nice little character moment there, and room for Hawkeye to do anything other than sit in that crane and not do anything.
Yeah. I mean, he has like 3 lines of okay dialogue, and there's like maybe 2 funny moments. I like where he's like, oh, I'm starting to root for this guy, and I like the his introductory shot of gun, no sword, no bow. Yeah, great idea. Those are funny, but they're very fleeting. And also his appearance is very fleeting. And I think you're right. Playing that up even just a tiny bit more into that sequence and his relationship with Coulson and why he's there and all that could have certainly been fleshed out and made that a lot more interesting. Hawkeye, one of my favorite characters for no real particular reason in the MCU. Very excited for Hawkeye. Yes, but you're right. He is underplayed. I'm glad that they introduced him earlier than the Avengers, but this is kind of the lamest way to introduce a character.
Yeah. I think even the Black Widow thing in Iron Man 2, she had more to do. Yes. She was in more of the movie. And we got a more interesting reveal of that she was Black Widow. But do you guys have anything else to say about Thor?
The very last thing I have to say is just jumps directly off that point. I like that Coulson's still here. I forgot how active Coulson is in Phase 1. Because I'm
not so much in later phases.
No, for good reason. That's when you spiral out into the pits of hell that is Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., the show that I watched until I literally couldn't convince myself to pretend to like it anymore. But I think Coulson's a good character, and I'm glad that he's got some good space in Phase 1.
Yeah.
Closing thoughts, and then we'll roll right into our scores for the film.
My closing thought is that I think this movie is fun. I think Kenneth Branagh was the right director for this story, and I think that when he's firing on all cylinders, he's really firing. And there's a nice range, in my opinion, from the comedic to the more serious, and some actual good thematic material carried throughout the entire storyline. But again, I do think the film is let down by that human subplot from time to time. I do think that there are good moments in there, but on the whole, that's certainly the weaker aspect of the film. And when I think back on Thor, I think back to the fish out of water thing, and it's in an overarching sense, but not really the specifics. I think there's a reason for that.
Yeah. Tucker?
I was just going to say, just to start off my thoughts, I don't think this movie is very fun. I really find myself frustrated with a lot of elements, and I'm doing that to do a yin-yang thing.
Oh,
but
sure.
I don't think this movie is very fun, and I find myself frustrated with a lot of elements for it. I think for me, this is one of the most mediocre Marvel movies, because while I think there are good elements, and I don't hate that I watched it, it definitely lets me down in a lot of ways, and it just feels like a really rocky stepping stone for future stories and characters and world building.
It's very strange to me, because every time I think back on this movie, I'm like, oh yeah, Thor gets too much hate as a film. I think it has some genuinely fun stuff. And then as I watched it, I'm like, wow, I'm just kind of disengaged throughout this entire thing. I can appreciate its highs, but its lows kind of stretch on for too long to be excusable. And like I said, a lot of the Thor's character arc is there. He becomes selfless enough at the end of this movie to give up seeing Jane to save an entire race of people, the Frost Giants, who he hates. He gives up that just for that purpose. So that's a good character arc for him, and it's there. The humor's there. The cinematography's there. I think Kenneth Branagh is the right director, and it can be fun in moments. But it is just, you forget about a lot of parts of this movie, and those parts are the majority. So with that, I think we're ready to plug in our scores to our mythical, magical spreadsheet. We should get a Mjolnir-esque spreadsheet that comes to us at our beck and call.
Well, my number's in there.
By clicking on Google Sheets.
Yes. Okay, are we ready?
I'm ready to hit enter.
Okay, 3, 2, 1, go. Wow, look at that. Okay. Going in descending order, we have Abram at a 6.7. I gave it a 5.5, and Tucker gave it a 4.8. That all averages out to a 5.7, placing this at third place, above the Incredible Hulk, but below Iron Man 2. Are we all right with that, fellas? I mean, it doesn't really matter what your thoughts are on it, but because that's the way it is. And I'm gonna put my foot on the ground. I'm gonna put my Mjolnir on both your chests and say you cannot. No more change in scores week to week, unless I want to do it.
Sure, yeah, that's the power you have, I guess.
It's time for Captain America.
Yeah, also 2011. Crazy to think that this was the first time there was two Marvel movies in the same year.
Other than the year where that happened.
What? What are you talking about?
Didn't that happen with Hulk
He's fucking
and
around.
Iron
He's
Man?
fucking around. But also,
What? No, the Hulk. They haven't made a Hulk movie. Yeah, Hulk has never had a
Good
solo
point,
movie. I'm
good
not sure if
point.
you guys are
Good
aware
point.
of that.
yeah.
I wish, like, She-Hulk would be cool, but I wish they did a Bruce Banner movie. But unfortunately, I don't think they did. I don't know what you're talking about. Maybe you bumped your head when it came down in the Bifrost or something. I don't know. But yes, next week
Probably
is Captain America: The First Avenger. I'm very, very excited to return. I'll unakimbo my camera to address Captain America: The First Avenger. I love Captain America: The First Avenger. I love Captain America: The First Avenger. I think it is maybe the most underrated Marvel film. Maybe there's an argument to be made where that I will make it, that is the best comic book movie. It's a big claim. It's a hot claim, and I'm ready to take it. But what are you
I haven't seen
guys?
this
Are
movie
you
in a
guys excited?
decade. I literally haven't seen the
I'm
decade.
very excited. I like this movie a lot.
Yeah, me too.
And I'm interested to hear his thoughts as he works his way through the MCU and has enjoyed all of them so
I
far.
have. And of course, I've
Interesting.
seen all these movies before, but as we've talked about, I don't know if we talked about it on camera, I've rewatched very few of them. So
Sure. Yeah.
exciting times.
Folks, that's it. Thank you for joining us for this Thor review, and we'll see you next time back in the 1940s. The swinging 40s, that's what they're called.
That's what they do. That's what they call them.
Thanks for watching, everyone. We'll see you next time. When he comes back, we should act like we were talking about something really funny.
so
Nice
then
one.
I told her,
Yeah.
there's no way that actually happened. And she
I
told me, I swear on my life.
I think my favorite part is when they did the thing with the pinata and
Right.
and
I can't believe he didn't go to the
the
hospital.
whole joke about George Foreman was just the cherry on top, quite honestly.
I thought we were going to spend the whole day in the ER after that. But no, it didn't even go.
So true. King.
Oh, hey Tucker, I didn't even realize that
Oh,
you
yeah.
came
I
back.
saw you go like, hey, start laughing before I sat down. I'm not that stupid.